3 o'clock on this Monday afternoon. Welcome aboard the Postgame show along with Elijah Campbell. I'm Jay Phillips. Hope you all had a nice Mother's Day weekend. Those that celebrated. We had a brunch for my wife. It was nice.
Yeah, no, it sounded lovely. You described it to me when we were leaving on Friday, and I was like, you know what, that's a good idea.
It was nice. And weather cooperated. Gamecock baseball fans not feeling too good. Clemson baseball fans not feeling too good.
Wake Forest baseball fans feeling real good.
Yeah, and so are Georgia baseball fans. And Tennessee baseball fans feel okay. We didn't have any sweeps this weekend in conference play other than the Carolina-Georgia one, so didn't see that coming. And I said that on Twitter. We're going to jump right in. That's going to be the bulk of the show today, as you guys might imagine. Listen, I had some pushback from some. Yeah, I don't mind. How'd you not see that coming, Jay? Well, because I didn't see that, and I put in all caps, coming. If you had told me South Carolina was going to lose this baseball series at home to Georgia, I could see that.
Mm-hmm. And that would have been a gut punch in its own.
It would
considering where you're positioned.
It would have. If you had said to me that Carolina might be swept, I suppose I could get behind the notion that Georgia came into the series as one of the hottest teams in the country, and they've certainly exited the series as maybe the hottest team in the country right now.
Best RPI riser over the weekend.
Yeah, and Carolina dropped
to 19.
Yeah, 19. But I did not see South Carolina losing 3 games to Georgia the way they did. And Saturday, especially, Game 3, was just a tremendous punch to the gut. And then some. Really, a punch to the gut. And then when you're lying on the ground, you get kicked some more and you lose a couple of teeth. And, you've got to pick yourself back up. That's the hardest part right now, I believe. I genuinely do. So, listen, we can go very short term today, and we will. We can go sort of mid, and by that, I suppose I mean giving you an outlook to the end of the year. I listen, as you might imagine, I'm not going to shy away from it. There's a lot of chatter out there. Really, it's been there for a while. But, the Fire Kingston hashtags are back, and a lot of people have changed their Twitter handles to something along those lines. We're not doing that today because the season is still going on, and this team is going to the postseason. I don't really envision a scenario where this team misses the NCAA tournament. The worst you can do, and it would not be good, is 13-17 in conference play. But you've still got a quality RPI. You've still got some really good wins. You may drop to a 3 seed if you were to, say, be swept in Knoxville and not win a game in Hoover. Mm-hmm. I could potentially see that. But this team's going to the tournament. So there is that. Now, that being said, you're listening to someone talk right now who puts a bare minimum expectation every season on hosting. This is a program that should expect to host in the opening round of the NCAA baseball tournament every season. You won't do it every season. No one does. But that needs to be your benchmark. If you do, well, there you go. And if you can get into a season like the days of yesteryear when you were often a top 8 national seed, that's cool too. When you don't, you need to figure out why. Well, you're not going to now. Short of, I won't call it a miracle. I think that's too strong. But short of winning this series in Knoxville and getting at least a couple of wins in Hoover, you're not hosting. And the reason you're not going to host is because your pitching completely fell apart. I'd say it more strongly, but I can't. But I'll clean it up for you kids out there. And the pitching crapped the bed real bad.
Real bad.
Real bad. And Saturday especially, just, once it got bad, it got worse. That's who you are. So there's no fixing it. I threw out on Twitter today, we'll talk with Coach Kingston coming up bottom of the hour about what they can do to get back on track. And one of those things may be, as Mark has said, is moving Garrett Gainey into the starting rotation. They did that. He pitched well, but you lose the game. Ty Good gave you 80-something pitches when he wasn't supposed to pitch as early as he did in the opener. Do you put Ty into the rotation? Do you throw some things, no pun intended, at Tennessee that while they wouldn't be caught off guard or see them as unexpected, just different in terms of the scouting report they may have on you at this point in time? Kimball it's not happening. SQ didn't start this weekend, I know, but when he came in, once again, just didn't have it. I know Mark told us there was some arm issue there. Mm-hmm. So you got to think he's probably on the shelf. Now you're dipping really deep into this pitching well, and I'm not sure how deep it can really go to begin with. That's just it. This team, we looked at this team early and said, well, they're going to score some runs. There's no doubt about that. They're going to score some runs. But beyond that, if the pitching could come around, then you've and for most of it, until this past weekend, you were still in a position to be a tournament host. And now you're not. It can happen just like that, and it did. And let me, before I toss it to you, sir, you got to give Georgia a lot of credit. I know Gamecock fans don't want to hear that. All Gamecock fans right now, at least the angry ones, want to do is complain about their team, and I get it.
Yep.
I'm not gonna sit here and tell you how to feel, but I am gonna tell you that if you don't give Georgia the credit they deserve for how well they're playing, then you are doing it wrong. You can't just blame your team. Georgia's playing really, really, really good baseball right now. They've got maybe the best player in the country. They've got a kid who just won the Player of the Week award, who had doubled his home run output in one weekend. Their pitching did enough. Their pitching's not that great either.
I would say it's bad.
Yeah. We had a guy hit us on Twitter and say, you guys had me convinced that Georgia's pitching was going to be bad enough for Carolina to win again. Amen, brother. I didn't know Carolina's pitching was going to get that much worse.
South Carolina scored 7 runs a game over the weekend, which is good enough to be like 5th in the SEC if that was their total all season long. Yeah. They played to their average, if not better, That wasn't the issue. Georgia's pitching was just good enough.
But Georgia, averaged 13 runs a game?
Yes. A whole lot more. Yeah. You can't win that way.
No.
You went into the top of the 8th inning on Saturday with a 2-run cushion. And you blew it. I mean,
you had a 4-1. They made it 4-4. You had a 6-4.
Yep.
Wheels fell off.
And the wheels completely fell off in those last 2 innings. And you just could not. And a lot of it was with 2 outs.
Yeah.
You needed one more out in some of those innings to avoid the worst case scenario. And you couldn't get the 1 out. And that's the frustrating thing. And it also happened by way of missing the strike zone, throwing a ton of wild pitches. I think that was really the name of the game on Friday night. When the pitching woes happened, you had way too many balls hit the backstop, and Georgia was able to advance way too frequently, way too many easy passes. Look, you're like pitching. You should never, ever have a whip above 2. But the starting unit and the bullpen both had whip over 2. You weren't getting anything out of anybody that wasn't named Garrett Gainey.
Right.
That's an issue.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: Georgia didn't like if we're going back to Georgia's pitching. Really, outside of Leighton Finley giving them 5 innings of solid baseball, of really solid pitching. He didn't shut anybody out, but it was really solid. And then on Friday, having Colton Smith be able to go 5 1/3 inning, those 2 guys combining for 10 1/3 preserved Georgia to where their bullpen didn't have to get utilized.
Right.
And they have a bad bullpen.
Right.
They honestly do. They don't have a really good bullpen in terms of the numbers. Some of them are laughable. They pitched a guy that almost had like a 7 ERA. At one point in the game on Saturday, and he was able to get out of a few innings. They were just able to get out and close innings, and you couldn't.
Yeah.
And that was the big difference, and you can't have that happen in a series at home.
No, and look, again, some of you want to just, scrap it right now. Like I said, I get it. I'm gonna, there's a lot of you that hit us on Twitter. I'm gonna read a lot of your comments.
We got hit a lot on Twitter.
Yeah.
We got hit so much for bruised.
And again, I'm not telling anybody how to feel, but for the record, because again, this is a team that is going to the postseason. The only two times, and I don't know if I need to share this or not, but I'm going to so people know where I'm coming from. The only two times, at least when it comes to the Gamecocks, in my career, and I've been a talk show host now coming up on 22 years, the only two times that I have called for a coach to be removed from his job during a season are Darren Horns last year and Will Muschamp's last year. And really, I think I might have said it the year prior to Will when he got one more opportunity. Because it just looked untenable. So with that, and I heard Tyler read a text from somebody earlier about the end of the Fogler era and his detachment from the community. The reason Eddie left is not the same. Eddie should never have been. Coach McGee put too much on Eddie, and I think it was unrealistic. But I'm not going to go down the Eddie Fogler rabbit hole today. This team is going to the tournament. Now, that doesn't mean hey, back off. Because as I said, I understand that there is a different level of realistic expectation placed upon this team. Now, I draw a line at certain things. When I hear some people say, this team needs to be in Omaha every 3 years, that, to me, it's not that it's unrealistic. It's just too arbitrary. I mean, where do you come up with that? I mean, Coach Tanner went 6 times. I get it. 3 years on. And then there was a 6-year gap. Yep. And I always remind people, 08, 09, and I was on this radio station then. Well, I think it's just maybe past Ray by. Maybe it's just time for something else. It's just not quite happening anymore. You bring Holbrook in and you bring some talent in, and you go on another big run. And then those three, we all know how those ended. So it is realistic to put a different set of expectations on the baseball program. But I don't know if 3 trips to Omaha every 10 years or so, 4 trips. Again, how do you come up with this? Between 1985 and 02, after you had been 5 times in 10 years, 70s and 80s, you went 17 seasons without going to the World Series. Now it's been 12. So hosting every year, I'm with that.
Looks that puts you in position.
You need to get to the Supers, and Mark got there twice. Chad got there twice. That's good, but it's not great. And again, I get it. People want to go to Omaha. So is removing somebody the best way to do that right now? Yeah, we're going to hit a break here. And remember, should you do that, and I'm not here to talk about it in great detail today, but should you do that, chances are very good that you're rebuilding this roster from the ground up. And is that what you want to? It's just, I'm not saying it can or can't be done, but you got to think about everything. You do that. And Ethan Petrie's gone. He's transferring somewhere for his final year, as an example. And there would likely be others. If Messina doesn't go ahead and go pro this summer, I don't see him coming back. They're here to play for Mark. Now, again, take that as you will. So lots to think about here. Love to hear from you. 803-404-6100. Coach Kingston will be with Elijah and me coming up in about inside of 20 minutes. So we'll talk with Mark about what's going on this week and what he and Coach Williams may do with the pitching rotation. But don't hold back. We'll hear from you. We'll read the comments. 803-404-6100. Love Chevy phone lines, Firehouse Subs text line. You're listening to the Postgame Show. Not feeling like yourself as you get a little bit older, guys? You're wondering why? Don't wait for it to change. Don't wait for it to go away. Instead, schedule a consultation to talk with Dr. Dan Balknight and his team at the Men's Clinic. You'll get a one-on-one. It'll get to the root of the issue because Dan will talk with you about what you like, about what you do, about where you've been, just how you used to feel. And then it's a personalized plan for you. There's no one-size-fits-all treatment at the Men's Clinic. Guys just too often won't go to the doctor when they feel off. They think they can tough it out, like I said. Maybe you just don't want to talk about it at all. Don't be that guy. Get to feeling better with Dan Balknight and the Men's Clinic. They are experts in healthcare for men, dedicated to making you feel like yourself again. Call them up, 803-875-MENS, 803-875-MENS, and online, themensclinicsc.com. Nineteen minutes after 3 o'clock on this Monday afternoon. Welcome back into the postgame show. Jay and Elijah with you. Get into some phone calls in just a second. I threw out a tweet after the ball game Saturday afternoon. I see the timestamp here, 5:48 p.m. I said, yikes, didn't see that coming. Lots to discuss on Monday. A lot of you have responded to that, so thank you. I mean, I'm here for the engagement. Chip said to me, not sure why you didn't see that coming. The situation was tailor-made for an implosion. Starting pitching has been a disaster, which has thrown the rest of the bullpen in total disarray. At a potent offensive team like Georgia, add water and mix. I said, well, I didn't see this degree of loss coming. And I said, if you predicted that, good for you. He said, well, I didn't predict it. Now I'm paraphrasing, but I didn't. I did not see South Carolina getting humbled the way they did. 14-10. And really, was that game that close?
No. The spirit of that was like 14-7.
Yeah. Carolina scored a couple late to
hit a couple home runs on a bad bullpen late.
Right. 11-5 on Friday in a game that also just felt like,
You were down 5-1 by the time your starting pitcher was pulled, and you played from behind the entire game.
And Saturday, you had an eighth inning lead. You had an early lead at 4-1. Georgia tied it at 4. You went up 6-4, and then Georgia scored 10 unanswered runs. It was brutal.
Yeah, the eighth inning on Saturday being an implosion,
and the reason, and so again, if you listen, I don't care what people say to me, but why did I think Carolina had an opportunity here? Well, you went toe to toe with Arkansas. You went toe to toe with Kentucky.
Beat Kentucky 2-3.
So you won the series with Kentucky. I wouldn't say you went toe to toe with A&M. They were definitely better than you, but you won a game. You went to Florida and won the series. I know Florida's not what we typically think of. You swept Vanderbilt. I know Vandy's not what you typically think of. But nevertheless, so there were reasons to believe that you could win a game or certainly not get beat by an average of about 13-7, which is what this ended up being. I didn't see that coming. But at least Chip did give a nod to how well Georgia is playing, which I say, if you aren't including that in your equation, then I think you're doing the whole issue a bit of a disservice. Did Carolina have some failure? Without question. But Georgia may be the hottest team in America right now.
That lineup 1 through 9 is terrifying, and it's not just Condon too. Condon had a big night, the first night, but guys like Trey Phelps hitting 4 home runs in a weekend and doubling it, even though it's not like he's, some scrub. He just wasn't much of a home run hitter, but any given weekend he can let loose. That's terrifying. Corey Collins hit the ball about as well as anybody in the country this past weekend. And that guy leads off. I mean, having, Collins and Condon at a 1-2 punch to start, the lineup. There's not a lot of teams outside of maybe, Tennessee that have that much power at the top of their lineup and are able to replicate it down the order 1 through 9.
Right.
That's a really, really impressive team that if they get any type of pitching, they can see themselves getting a run.
Let's get to the phone lines on this Monday. Mike is going to start us off. Hey, Mike, good afternoon.
Hey, Jay, thanks for letting me on real quick. I'm the one that sent that text about that comparison with Coach Fogler and Coach Kingston. I actually like both of them. I've talked to you before. We were at Carolina at the same time, just didn't know you. Unfortunately, I love you. But my blood pressure just boils when I hear all these fans. I'm a diehard Gamecock, but I think respectfully, both coaches have done quite well. I mean, obviously, we won't go down that rabbit hole about Fogler, but Fogler wanted to stay here. I just think they've both had a little bit of an issue connecting with the fans. Mm-hmm. That being said, my point in that text was that I just couldn't elaborate on more. I was telling Elijah that, good Lord, I mean, this is the hardest conference in all of America this year. And I don't know if y'all caught what Coach Kingston said in one of the clips y'all played earlier about in this day in the transfer portal era, you can rebuild pretty quickly. And he's not trying to make an excuse. That's a good Georgia team. But, he's going up against a lot more than Coach Tanner Holbrook or even Coach Raines ever did. And I like Coach Kingston, and I feel bad he's getting a bad rap. I feel like the pitching obviously is not where we want it to be, but goodness gracious, I mean, this year to be where we are with having struggles in the, with pitching again, I just think people need to lighten up a little bit. I didn't get to expand on that, but that's kind of where I was going.
Mike. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. And listen, I will not shy away from the fact that I am one who has said there are times when a lack of connection to the fan base can be problematic. If nothing else, it can help buy you some goodwill. Maybe not time. Results will always be the number one arbiter here, right? Like, I mean, how are you doing? But again, Mark, this team's going to the tournament. This team is having a very unfortunate last couple of weeks when it comes to pitching. And they did go in. They did a nice job in the portal. It's always hard to tell whether it's high school or portal recruiting. And college baseball, those of you who follow this sport closely understand that college baseball has really always been operating in more of what we call a portal era than basketball or football ever have, simply because of the junior college ranks. So many guys that go from high school to JUCO or community college for the reason that they can more quickly get looked at. Maybe they don't want to sign with a 4-year school, which binds you to college baseball for 3 full seasons. So
late bloomers. They're just late bloomers.
Sometimes they are. Look at a kid like Condon who's coming around even. But, not that he's a JUCO kid, but you see my point. But
he was about to go D3. That was one of his options, to go D3.
Yeah. But college baseball and college coaches are more familiar. I think we're placing maybe too much right now in the so-called portal era by using basketball and football when college baseball, again, has been doing this for a long time. It's different now in terms of the kids at 4-year schools, I grant you. But it's not so different, really, in terms of roster management and national recruiting for the coaching staffs around the country. Look, it didn't work out for Kimball. Doesn't mean it can't at some point, but when you come back from that kind of surgery and you hadn't pitched in a while, it's just not there. I don't know what's wrong with Dylan Eskew, but it's just not there. Eli Jones has been up and down. It's just not there. Matthew Becker, do you need to move him around a little bit? It's been an up and down season for Becker, and he's a pretty solid pitcher. Ty Good, they tell us, who had been a starter at his previous stop. Well, we like him more in the bullpen role. Well, you may have to pull some strings now. Gainey, same thing. Mark said, and we'll ask him in just a few minutes, what are you going to do this weekend? So I think they went out and got some pieces. I think they did a pretty good job in the portal. But that the pitching imploded to this degree, you can't predict that. And it's in an era, as you've pointed out, Elijah, where this year runs are just at a bigger number. That's just it's things are cyclical, especially in college baseball. And we don't have gorilla ball anymore. We don't have these bats again that are 34 inches and 24 ounces. Yeah. But it's been figured out a little bit.
Yeah.
And you just runs are way up, but it shouldn't be like this.
There are very few elite pitching staffs in the SEC and in the country.
Mike, thanks for the phone call. All right, Coach Kingston, on the other side of the break. What's up with the pitching? What's up with this week's rotation? Again, all you got left is 3 regular season games in Knoxville, and then you see what happens in Hoover. Coach Kingston joins us when the postgame show returns. If you're a homeowner looking to make some improvements around the house, like maybe updating that 90s kitchen to today's more modern look, or the family's getting a little older, the kids need a little extra space, time for you to tap into your home's equity And a home equity line of credit from Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union could be just what the doctor ordered. They're local. They're not for profit. That means that when you borrow from Palmetto Citizens, you can get great low rates. You'll pay lower closing costs, lower application fees. And when you unlock your home's equity with Palmetto Citizens, you can access that line of credit over the 10-year draw period. That means as the kids get a little older and your needs change and everything else that's going on, hey, you don't have to borrow one big lump sum. Get it when you need it. Apply today. Learn more. PalmettoCitizens.org, or stop into any of their 14 convenient Midlands locations. My wife and I are customers. We love them. Palmetto Citizens. Achieve your potential. Talking Carolina baseball on this Monday. Welcome back in. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. Coach Mark Kingston joining us now as he does every Monday here right around 3:30. Always appreciate his time. Mark, you've had a day to process all of this. I know Saturday was a gut punch after a difficult Thursday and Friday. I'm not going to ask you how you've reassessed anything right now, but with a day to comprehend what happened, How have you and your ball club responded to this in terms of trying to flush it, knowing at the same time that that's easier said than done?
Well, you have no choice. You flush it. You understand the big picture. We've had some great weekends, and obviously this was our low point of the year. And so you've got to handle it properly. You've got to move on, and you've got to focus on Tennessee. You don't belabor the point that we didn't play as well as we wanted. You learn the things that you need to learn. You make the adjustments you need to make, and you focus on Tennessee and keep the train moving. That's all you can do.
You mentioned, and I'll quote you, you said Georgia played their ass off and we didn't, and you also noted that the Bulldogs maybe are the best offense that you've seen this season. So there's that about how well you thought Georgia played. But I am curious as to how you and Coach Williams have been, I don't want to ask you more privately assessing your pitching staff, but have you seen chinks in the armor? Have you seen some of the things that led to Georgia being so explosive against your pitchers?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to find predictability within our pitching staff, and we've got a lot of guys that are very capable and have had great moments. We're just looking for the guys that will be the most predictable, where we know generally what we're going to get when they go out there. We've been a little inconsistent, and because of that, we've had to change roles of guys. We're trying to find who fits best where, and we're just continuing to look for the guys to really take hold of a role when they get the opportunity. And as I said, I think many of them have the ability to do it. We just need to continue to work to get there. But yeah, that was the best offense we've seen all year, from top to bottom, power-wise. They didn't run, they don't bunt, they just get in there and they bang. And they did it all weekend, and I didn't expect us to give up that many runs. I expected us to give up some runs because they score on everybody, and they've done that to most teams. But I just didn't expect it to get to that point. And then especially in Game 3, when we're up by 2 going to the 8th inning, I felt really good that game was going to be won by us. And, we didn't pitch well in the last couple innings, and they finished strong. So their RPI is number 2 in the country right now. It's one of the best teams in the country, but I still hold out hope that we are as well. And we just got to keep looking for that winning form.
And speaking of, the pitching staff, you can't help but notice exactly how well Garrett pitched from a starting role, going 5 1/3 and striking out 7, only walking 1, and only giving up two earned. I thought he pitched really well in that role, and I know that's something that you guys have considered for a little bit, but have kept him in the bullpen because that's how I guess Matt felt that he pitched best out of. But it does kind of feel like he's your best pitcher right now. Is this a role that you see him sticking with moving forward in terms of continuing to start and maybe try to get you deeper into ball games?
There's no question that him and Ty Good, I think, have been our best and most consistent 2 pitchers. Though the key is, okay, if he starts, then who's going to finish the game? Or if one guy finishes the game, who's going to start? And that's been our challenge. Gainey has helped us win so many games in the role he was in. He pitched in a manner Saturday, that allowed us to win that game too. So we have to just figure out what is the best combination of 9 innings for us to get a W. And as we look into the Tennessee weekend, that we're going to approach that one way. But then as we look into the future, into the NCAA tournament, you've got to win 3 games on a weekend, and we're going to attack all the different ways that we might be able to approach winning 3 games on a weekend for the regional. So there's no question he pitched like a dominant starter the other day, and that's what I thought would happen, and it did. So we've got to gain enough confidence that if he does go to that starting role, we're going to have guys that can slam the door shut once he hands the ball to us with a lead.
Talking to Coach Mark Kingston on this Monday. Jay and Elijah with you. Carolina will be at Tennessee this weekend to close out the regular season. Thursday and Friday, 6:30 starts Saturday afternoon from Knoxville. You told us last week that Dylan Eskew might have had a little soreness in Columbia, Missouri, and maybe he's just not giving you what you want. Roman Kimball, obviously coming off surgery a couple years ago, trying to work his way back. In your opinion, you've been around this sport a long time, how much of this is fatigue? How much of this is ability? And how do you and Matt try? I mean, you mentioned earlier you're trying to find those roles, but it's one thing that for a guy that doesn't have ability. It's one when a guy does have ability and he's struggling with confidence. Where are those fine lines for you guys, especially this late in the season?
Yeah, I think those two guys have the ability to pitch in the roles that we've asked them to do. Again, SQ shut out Kentucky a couple weeks ago, and they're the number one ranked team in the country from an RPI standpoint. So he's more than capable of getting us 6 outs like we asked him to do the other day. He got us many more than that when he shut out Kentucky. And we just thought, okay, let's give him the ball, let him get his 6 outs, assume he'll pitch like he did in that Kentucky series. And it just didn't work out. Doesn't mean it won't work out the next time. But again, we're trying to figure out where our guy's most comfortable. Maybe he's more comfortable early in the game rather than late. And everybody's personality leads itself to some guys like the middle, some guys like the beginning, some guys like the end. Some guys are so talented that you can pitch them anywhere and they'll do great. So it's a combination of all those things, but I think, again, we've got to get those guys comfortable in whatever role they are so that we get the best out of them.
Talking with Coach Mark Kingston, and Mark, batting-wise, you guys still were able to put up enough runs that would normally win you some games in the SEC. So, averaging 7 runs a game in a weekend series in this conference would still put you in the upper half in terms of offensive production. And I guess when the pitching's struggling like it has, it can put a lot of pressure and strain on your hitting lineup. But how do you think your lineup has been able to handle that pressure here in these last few games?
No, the offense over the last month has been very good. There's no question about that. We averaged 7 runs a game, as you mentioned, this weekend. That's plenty good enough to win games if we're pitching the way we normally do. And so I'm pleased with where the offense has come. I think it's one of the better offenses around now as it's currently constructed. And I still think it can get better with some more consistency from a few guys. But I think the offense is doing more than enough. And again, early in the year, the pitchers were pulling their weight, and as we were waiting for the offense to come around, and now it's a little bit of a flip of that. But at the end of the day, when we lace them up to play in the NCAA tournament, you hope that they're both really at the top of their game, and that's what we're targeting.
You got Will Tippett back into a couple of games this weekend, so he's feeling better. What does that do in terms of maybe how you practice this week? You guys will leave on Wednesday to start a Thursday through Saturday series, so still fluid there, or will you go back? You made that trade-off of defense for offense. How's that looking right now?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jay. I mean, it's something we're evaluating. Obviously, when Lee Croy was in there at short, he made all the routine plays, and generally is going to give us pretty consistent at bats, although he's been struggling some lately. But I always hold out hope and think positive that our guys will reach their best form. Tippett has more range at shortstop defensively, so you just have to balance which one are you looking for on any given day. Do you want more range on defense? Do you want more quality at bats? Because both of those guys bring different things to the table. So we'll evaluate who we're pitching in terms of how many ground balls we may get on a given day, or are we throwing a fly ball pitcher? We'll evaluate who we're facing from the other team, and is it a fly ball team, a ground ball team? So we'll factor in all those things. I think the other 8 guys are pretty consistent in the fact that they need to be in the lineup with the way they're swinging the bats. So that position right there is something we'll continue to evaluate. But again, they both bring different things to the table, and it's just which do we think is more important on that day.
When do you think you and Coach Williams decide on who goes when this weekend from a starting rotation standpoint?
Well, we already started to talk about it this morning because, again, how they throw throughout the course of the week has a lot to do with when they pitch on the weekend. So we already discussed that this morning. I would guess we'll make it public, probably Wednesday on our way to Tennessee. But that'll be here soon enough.
And lastly, real quick, is there any conversation at all amongst the team, that's staff, players, about the hosting situation or that's taken a hit, if nothing else, this past weekend? Or is it something that's a known that isn't spoken of?
Obviously the guys follow everything just like everybody else does. They know that we were within the top 16 of the RPI, which means you're going to host. And now we're just outside the top 16 of the RPI. So, I mean, guys aren't stupid. They follow things. They know. You don't need to talk about it. I mean, everybody, at the end of the day, everybody's job is to work hard and try to win the next game. And if you do that enough, then you get to host. And if you don't, then you don't. It's pretty much that simple.
Coach, safe travels this weekend. Best of luck. We'll talk to you next week ahead of the tournament. Always appreciate you.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. That is Gamecock head baseball coach Mark Kingston. We'll assess a lot of what Mark had to say when the postgame show continues. Twelve minutes in front of 4 o'clock on this Monday afternoon. Welcome back into the postgame show. Jay and Elijah with you. Thanks again to Coach Kingston for joining us. 803-404-6100. If you would like to be part of the program, or you can hit us on Twitter at jphillips1075. at @E_Campbell3 or the station Twitter feed, 1075 The Game. A lot of you have hit us on the Firehouse Subs text line as well. Let me get one more hit from Twitter, and then I'm going to turn it over to Elijah. Laurie asks, do we need more good players, or do we need pitchers with defined roles with a commitment to developing them in those roles? Baseball is a highly mental game, pitching especially. Constant and often last-minute changes are a huge ask of your pitchers and can't be treated like lineup changes. But then she added, I thought very nicely, they need time and grace and patience to adjust to new roles. Got to keep believing in them. That's an excellent, excellent question, Lori. And, to borrow from our good friend Michael Haney, you are who you are right now. I mean, South Carolina's played 50 baseball games, 51 baseball games, right? You are who you are. So, look, Gainey and let's say Gainey and Good go into the rotation this weekend. I think Good's made one start.
I believe so.
Now Gainey's made one start. So, you almost would say, and I say this a little tongue in cheek, like, well, they've got a new role. They've done it before, so go do it again. It's as Mark said, it's easier said than done, because if you do that, then you adjust in other spots, equal and opposite reaction and all those kind of things. So, I would say, Laurie, if I may, not to dodge your question, but to answer it, do we need more good players, or do we need pitchers with defined roles? Yes.
Just yes.
I mean, and I don't mean to be a smartass, because listen, y'all know, again, I really should get T-shirts made. I will always say more good players. I don't care if I'm what Kirby's got over in Athens right now with his football team, or what Nick had at the height of his powers. You always want more good players. That's college sports. Again, high school, by and large, the district you live in. The pros have a draft, or at least free agency once you've been selected into the league the first time. College, go get as many as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I come back around to a question I asked the late, great Dan Reeves the last time I got to interview him. It was during COVID when Shane got hired. And the last question I asked him in that interview was, Coach, you got any advice for your new head football coach here at your alma mater? He said, yeah. Tell him to go get some players. It's college football, and that Georgia accent of his. That's it. And same thing is true. I mean, go get more good players. So, yeah, but I do think it's a big ask. When you've got some guys, Laurie, that clearly are just not pitching up to their potential for whatever reasons, be it a combination of ability, injury, whatever, and you're trying to redefine the pitching staff in mid-May, it's a big ask.
Yeah.
It's a big ask.
It is a very big ask. But I will say, if you do get the better pitchers, you get more better pitchers, that should make your job easier in finding where to put them, right?
Yep.
I mean, because I get the mentality, the science, and everything behind, why a pitcher might be better in one role than the other. I think at this point now, you just got to find out who your best pitchers are and find ways to get them in the game longer. Because while Garrett Gainey is great, I think pound for pound, he's your best pitcher. And he does you no good when you're down 4 runs.
Nope.
He does you no good. Certain pitchers do you no good when, like Ty Good had to come into the game. They're down 4-0 before South Carolina even was able to have bats in their hands.
One out in the first, right?
That puts him in a really hard position. You don't get to maximize exactly how good Ty Good can be, right? And I think the reason you led for most of the game and the reason that you were in such a good position on Saturday was because Garrett Gainey got you 5 1/3, and you were in a position to win that game, and it fell apart there later, as opposed to playing catch up, early on in the game. At this point, if I'm Mark, I'm not, but if I am, I'm just Garrett Gainey's our ace.
Yeah.
We're starting games off, and we'll figure it out from there. We can platoon from there to try to get one out here and there, and maybe not rely too much on one specific pitcher in the bullpen having to throw a bunch, and then be able to use them in different maybe platooning situations, matchup situations. At this point, I'm leaning towards my 3 starters being Ty Good, Garrett Gainey, Eli Jones, just because those are your best pitchers in whatever way I can get my best pitchers in the game longer, even if it means asking them to do something they haven't done, particularly all year. I mean, Garrett Gainey's only thrown more than 2 innings in a game in 10 of his 20 appearances.
Right.
That's half. Half the time he is there less than 2 innings. So it's a little bit of an ask to get him to get you longer into a game.
Yeah, he's in conference games. That's a great point. In conference games, he has 26 innings pitched in 12 games.
But in those games in which he's pitched at least 2 innings, he struck out 41 batters, has walked 3, has a whip of 0.84, and an ERA below 2.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
And if that means asking him to throw a couple more innings than normal, and he's not comfortable at this point, I don't know what you have to lose in terms of stability of your pitching staff.
Laurie, thanks for the question. Got a lot more hits on Twitter, and the Firehouse Subs text line is filling up. So thank you for that. Continue to add your thoughts, questions, comments. We will get to a lot more of that as we discuss the more immediate future for Carolina baseball ahead of the weekend series finale at Tennessee. This is the Postgame Show.
Been talking a lot about prize picks this season in terms of the basketball and hockey playoffs, and those are still going on. You can still get in on the action with the #1 fantasy sports app in America, but they have a special promotion for you specifically for this week on Tuesday because the women's basketball season professionally will be tipping off, and one Caitlin Clark will be making her debut on Tuesday, and Prize Picks is celebrating the occasion by having a promotion where her point projection is only at 0.5 points, meaning if you choose that projection for your entry, all she's got to do is score. That could just be a free throw. She can end the game with 1 point, and that will count as a success towards you on your entry. This goes all the way up until that game tips off, which is tomorrow at 8 o'clock Eastern time. So if you go into the Prize Picks app, you'll see the square right there, and you'll see the time that you have to be able to place it and be able to watch the winnings roll in. Just download 1075 The Game. Use promo code 1075GAME for a deposit match. Pick more, pick less. That easy.
4 o'clock, Monday, May the 13th. Welcome back into the postgame show alongside Elijah Campbell. I'm Jay Phillips. Coach Mark Kingston joined us in the last half hour. If you missed that, Elijah will put it up on the podcast page, and we will, industry term, re-rack some of that for you coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. But we are spending a lot of time talking Carolina baseball on this Monday after a humbling, in some people's minds, maybe even to stay with home, a humiliating weekend of baseball. Georgia 14-10, 11-5, and 14-6 over South Carolina this weekend. The Gamecocks go, well, we haven't seen the latest projections, but let's be honest with ourselves. South Carolina has fallen out, I'm certain, of the hosting opportunity at this point. Those bids don't go out for 2 more weeks. So there's an opportunity that exists. Wake Forest, as we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago, Wake Forest was projected into a Columbia Regional, but we said, hey, just wait. Wake Forest has big games left, including that series with Clemson. That was in Winston-Salem. The Deacs swept the Tigers. Wake, I feel certain, will be on the hosting line.
Georgia, leapfrogging, yeah.
Yeah, Georgia was projected last week after they were not the week prior. Now I feel certain that Georgia is going to be a host. I think Georgia is so hot right now. If they win another series this weekend, the way they are playing too, I could actually see Georgia doing some damage in Hoover. Georgia may be, I'm not predicting it per se, but maybe a team that gets mentioned as a top 8. I mean, they're playing that well. They really are. They're playing very good baseball at this point in time. Before we get into a lot of what Elijah has on the text line, the results from the weekend: Tennessee took 2 of 3 from Vandy. Tennessee won the first 2. Vandy salvaging the series yesterday. Kentucky took 2 of 3 at Florida. Bama took 2 of 3 from LSU. That was an interesting series. Arkansas took 2 of 3 from State. And Mississippi did themselves a big favor in terms of tournament opportunity. They took 2 of 3 from A&M. So, again, each of those series had ramifications for each team playing, depending on exactly who was, who you're looking at. And for the Gamecocks, again, it was holding on to a hosting spot. And for Georgia, trying to increase, their opportunity. Georgia did the job. South Carolina did not. And I'll say again, Elijah, then I'm going to toss it to you for some texts. Again, Carolina pitching was horrible. I'm not going to say anything more than that because
can't sugarcoat that.
Yeah, but I don't need to really just pile on. Mm-hmm. I think horrible speaks for itself. But at the same time, Georgia is playing fantastic baseball. Mm-hmm. So both of those things coupled together, and you get where you are. But I will say again, I did not see that kind of basically an average score of 13-7. I did not see that coming.
No, absolutely not. And we go into the text line right now, the Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. We'll start with York. I thought York had it's a point that I would like to address to in terms of the way the SEC is this season. He said, Jay, I agree with the caller, but the statistics support that SEC competition is tougher than when we went on our run. I think so. And I don't know if it's tougher per se. I will say it's different because there's not a ton of dominant starting pitching this year.
Right.
I think what South Carolina is kind of mirrors what a lot of other teams are in terms of strength. Them and Georgia are pretty similar. You hit for power really well. You hit the ball all over the park. You score a lot of runs. You'll give up a lot of runs because Georgia doesn't have a pitching staff that's going to win them any awards. You rank very similar in terms of the season numbers and the conference numbers in terms of, ERA, walks, strikeouts, things like that. You're very similar in that regard. Georgia just hit better and hit better struggling pitching this week because Georgia struggled on the mound themselves, but they just did better at taking advantage of that pitching this weekend. I think if you end up playing them, if these two teams played a lot during the season, I think you'll get relatively even results. You just didn't have it this weekend. And you look at other teams in the conference. Florida hits the ball pretty well. Jack Caglione is a one-man offense. They cannot pitch to save their lives. They're one of the worst pitching staffs in the SEC.
And again, there's some irony there because, Kevin O'Sullivan is a pitching coach.
Exactly, which is very ironic. There are very few teams that are excelling at both. Even you look at Kentucky, a team that has the best SEC record. They don't necessarily hit for a ton of power, but they hit for good average. They don't make a ton of mistakes, and their pitching isn't overwhelmingly good, right?
Right.
And they're the most unique team in the conference. I think a lot of teams fall into the category that Georgia and South Carolina fall under, which hits really well, has an awesome batting lineup. The pitching is the big question mark, right? Really, if you look at pitching staffs, the only two that would terrify you are Arkansas and Texas A&M.
That's fair.
And I think normally it's not that way. There are, I guess, more teams with better pitching staffs.
Yeah.
So I think it's different. I think the SEC is different. I don't know about better per se, but different.
Yeah, I think there are just look. I think talent is spread a little more thinly around the conference these days too, and around the country. It's just we've seen a lot of change. It was the best conference in the country back then.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a little deeper now? I mean, again, you might have 12 schools go to the tournament.
You could. You easily could. The only non-starters are Missouri and Auburn.
Yeah, they're not. But every other school, again, I think 10 are in. I think Florida and Ole Miss have still maybe some work to do.
Yeah. Ole Miss helped out their case a lot this weekend, though.
They did.
They took 2 or 3 from a top 5 team.
Yeah. And again, Florida losing a series again at home. And they're hovering around 500. I even saw that Sully may be attempting to add a midweek game
to try to boost the resume,
just to play a game and get a win. I mean,
yeah.
At that point, who are you calling?
Is Stetson available?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. It's not Stetson's only maybe an hour away from Gainesville.
Maybe. I'm not sure where DeLand is.
Yeah, that's not too far, but I don't know. Anyway, so all right, what else we got?
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and look. I think so. This is from Trent. Trent says, most disappointing thing for me this weekend was the fact that we were playing so well in an almost must-win series, if I can read, and we didn't even lose on a fluky baseball player. Pitching was absolutely dominated for 27 innings by UGA, which I do agree. Tip of the cap to those gentlemen. Insane bats for them.
Yeah, that's again to not win the series was going to be difficult to swallow. To be swept, because again, that's the one thing I've been saying that. Listen, this is how I am. Even if I may, I don't feel too badly about the Braves losing last night. All right, because I hate the Mets, and the Braves had won the first 2, and I was like, cool, Braves are going to sweep the Mets, and then a 9th inning home run beats the Braves. I was like, well, you won 2 out of 3. Like I never go in expecting a sweep in either direction. I mean, maybe for a few of your early non-cons, I might. But even then, I really just don't. Like Belmont won here, right? I mean, it's baseball. The nature of the sport is that somebody's going to win 2 out of 3. When you don't do that and you're the loser, you need to ask yourself why. And in this case, we do know why. Pitching, again, was just not anywhere close to where it needed to be. And the implosion late Saturday, it just makes it feel that much worse. Like at that point, you were like,
on top.
Yeah, like you got to, okay, well, all right, we didn't have it the first 2, but now we got to salvage this one. Whatever you scrape and claw and whatever you got to do. And you were kind of doing that.
It was in your hands going into the 8th inning.
You were doing that for 21 outs, and then you didn't. And that makes it that much harder. So, yeah, I agree. What was his name? Trent? Trent.
Yep.
I agree. I think Elijah and I said, and I don't want to speak too much for him, so I'll say what I said. I didn't call it a must-win series. I called it, I think in Missouri I said it's a you better win series, and they did. And then here I said it's a you really need to win series. And yes, I'm playing semantics because we could all say must win if you want, but I just try to reserve must win for the more literal truth to that. But this was, and it was certainly Trent, hey, don't get swept series.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you did.
Yeah.
So that's, and listen, there's a way to overcome this. There is. But it requires you trying to go beat the same kind of offensive team, basically, in their place.
With one really good starter.
Yeah.
I think Drew Beams qualifies as like a really good starter. The rest is hittable.
So, if you're South Carolina, let's see. Mark mentioned in postgame you were there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, had a little huddle, and asked the guy, everybody in who we are. I felt like the whole team was shell shocked Saturday afternoon late.
Yeah,
they didn't. Again, I keep coming back to the phrase they didn't see that coming.
no.
And that's why I asked Mark today, like, have you had a chance to process, like, what happened, assess who you are, who they are, and then try to pick it back up? That's a big ask.
It is. Well, and that's the thing, too. You put yourself in a really bad position to where your margin for error is getting really thin if you want, like, an advantageous spot in the NCAA tournament. I think the hosting ship has sailed unless you do something like sweep Tennessee, get those 3 back, and sweep Tennessee on the road, which very unlikely. And then going to Hoover and doing something you're not historically known to do, and that's make a run through that tournament and, hell, even win it. That would be the one thing that puts you back in it, because the amount of quad 1 wins you're going to pick up.
Yeah. If South Carolina wins the SEC tournament, they'll host. Yeah,
exactly.
But I don't expect them to go sweep this weekend. I don't know that I expect them to win the series. Listen, I'll say this much: don't get swept.
Yeah, and that's going to be easier said than done, because the way that team hits in the most hitter-friendly ballpark. I joked I was sitting with Alan Cole after the game in the press room, and I said, well, at least you don't have to go play a team that hits a lot of home runs in a pitcher-friendly park. I was like, ooh, just kidding.
Well, the good news is you can hit home runs too.
You can, exactly. You can. So there's going to be a lot of runs being scored, and if they are able to win in a shootout and you're able to get, enough from the relief pitchers, and it's not asking for much, enough. You're going to be get out of innings. Get that last out, because if you look at it in the Georgia game too, and the last one on Saturday, most of the damage that Georgia did with 2 outs. Right. I mean, you had them on the ropes,
right.
even in that pivotal inning that cost you the game. You still had them down to their final out of that inning, and you just couldn't get that one last out. The margin's gonna be pretty thin at that point, and it's gonna be a lot tougher this weekend. But it's still an opportunity to be able to, I guess I don't want to say undo. You can't undo it, but to be able to get some back, if you will.
That's all you got in front of you. Go do what you can. Again,
because if you pout your way all the way to Knoxville, they're going to run rule you for a couple of games. You got to understand what is ahead of you still.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get beat 13-7 again, or whatever else. Or worse, like you said. Yeah, or worse.
In that park? Yeah, goodness gracious.
All right, we got more hits on the text line. We'll get to those on Twitter as well. Again, 803-404-6100 to join in on the Firehouse Subs text line. You are listening to the Monday postgame show. 18 minutes after 4 o'clock on this Monday afternoon. Welcome back into the postgame show. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. We will get into a few other things. The ACC meetings, we're going to talk more Carolina baseball in a second, but just to let you know what else is going on, the ACC spring meetings have gotten underway at Amelia Island. That should be fun.
Where is Amelia Island? That sounds lovely. It either sounds lovely or it sounds scary.
No, I think it's near
I don't think there's an in-between.
Jacksonville, right? Somebody's probably screaming right now.
I have never heard of Amelia Island, but now I'm intrigued.
I may as well look it up for you, but
might as well. We have all the information in the world at our fingertips at any given time, really.
let's see. Yeah, not too far. Not too far.
And then the ACC chose it.
It's like right. It's like right above Jacksonville.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, I thought so. Just making
near
sure.
St. Augustine, I would assume, which is one of my favorite.
St. Augustine is to the south.
Okay.
By about 30 minutes.
Do love St. Augustine.
Yeah, man. When you go to that old fort at St. Augustine,
awesome.
man, we were driving to the Carolina West Virginia bowl game, and I had never been to St. Augustine, and so I'm 23 or whatever, and we just decided because it was such a long drive. Like, oh my! By the way, those of you who've driven to Fort Lauderdale or Miami from here,
that sounds terrible,
dude.
That sounds
I will never.
awful.
I assure you, I will never do it again. I certainly won't be the driver. I might, you don't know this, but those of you who are old enough, remember the old A team with Mr. T? Like they had to knock him out, BA, because he hated like flying and stuff. Like if you knock me out, then you can put me in a car to Miami.
But you will not be conscious for a car ride to Miami. That sounds miserable.
It was. I mean, when I remember getting a little south of Daytona, and I was like, "We got how far left?" I wanted to turn around and go home.
You're like, what, 8 more hours?
It wasn't that bad, but it was like another 4.5. It was so far.
Terrible.
Anyway, so on the way down, we decided that we'd break the trip up a little bit, and we were all like, "Hey, why don't we go over and have lunch in like the old town of St. Augustine?" And I'd never been to that fort before, and I was like, "Oh my God, this place is bleeping awesome."
It rules, man.
So those of you who've never done that, go. And if you have, then you probably agree with us.
That was one of my best friends from school. We all ended up going to college together after high school. He was originally from St. Augustine, so his family still lived there. So we always had a hookup for a place to stay. And so every spring break in college, we would go to St. Augustine. And spring break was always on my birthday because I was in the first week of March. So I spent birthdays 20 through 24 in St. Augustine.
Now, is it true if you're from St. Augustine, you have to wear one of those cool like Spanish soldier helmets?
A conquistador helmet? Yeah. Oh, you have to. Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm sure I'm sure he was given one at birth.
Sure.
Like at the hospital. If you're born in the hospital in St. Augustine, they give you one.
Give you one.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be the size of, an adult conquistador helmet, but you have to grow into it. But you're bestowed it at, on the day of your birth.
Yeah. But anyway, the ACC meetings have started. The CFP title game will be in Vegas in 2027.
Lovely.
Is it? Yeah. The scourge of gambling.
Ooh, scary.
Until Vegas, nobody
ever did it. Ooh, scary.
Anyway, all right. Let's get back on the Firehouse Subs text line. Lots of talk around Carolina baseball after a again humbling weekend at Founders Park against Georgia.
Yeah, not so chill weekend, but a nameless texter I thought brings up a pretty interesting point here. So I think the baseball team is in a similar situation to how Frank Martin's team was his last year. I think most liked Frank, but the program was just stagnant. I see the baseball team the same way. Yes, if they get rid of Kingston, the team will be down for a year or two, but I think it's worth it considering with the right coach, USC can get back to Omaha in 3 to 5 years. I just do not see Kingston ever getting USC to Omaha.
Yeah, I suppose there's some similarity. Frank only made the one tournament. He had a couple of teams that I think were probably good enough, but again, you got to win some games. Mark, again, this team this year is going to the tournament. But to be fair, I understand how Carolina fans look at the baseball team here, the baseball program here, relative maybe to men's basketball or even football when it comes to a level of postseason expectation. Dawn's team stands alone now in terms of what it's expected to do. But, Yeah, I suppose I can see that. You know, and again, I'm not really. I'll take the first part. I'm not here to talk about potential coaching changes for, again, a team that's going to the postseason. Let's see what happens. But yeah, and we had a caller last week ask us. Trying to remember his name, Elijah. I think he called maybe Wednesday and just asked if we thought that the crowds at the ballpark were as energetic as they used to be. And I know you've only been in Columbia for a while, so this is your first full season of Carolina baseball, but you know of the program, obviously. Yep. But I said, yeah, I think it is different. I don't think it's as energetic, and I think a lot of it, while maybe not apathy, is just there's a faction. And again, this is how you feel. So this is not a judgment. This is an observation as someone who's been going to these games for a long, long, long time at two different ballparks. There's just a faction of this fan base that I think until they get back to what they remember from 20 years ago, they just don't care as much, from say 12 to 20 years ago, 2, 3, 4. And then 10, 11, 12. And you went to a bunch of super regionals in between. You're not there now. It's not this annual trip to the supers, which, again, equates to an annual trip to the Sweet 16. And so you place a little bit more on the shoulders of this program than you would for men's basketball in terms of an annual expectation. Mm-hmm. And that comes back around a little bit to even the Eddie Fogler comparison from a while back. Mike McGee back then, Eddie got him to 2 straight tournaments, and then they had a bad year in B.J. Mackey's senior season. And McGee was like, I'm expecting to make tournament every year. And Eddie was like, well, Mike, that's unrealistic. Why would you expect that when you haven't done it? Let's maybe go every other year first.
Right. Before we start going every year,
But for Carolina baseball, there was a long stretch of going to the tournament every year. I get it. It was when Holbrook's team, that one Holbrook team that didn't make the tournament, that was odd around here.
Watching an NCAA tournament being played in South Carolina.
And you weren't part of it, because you'd gone 15 straight years or whatever. Mm-hmm. That was just weird. And then Chad had another year where they didn't make it. And that's really what undid Chad was that, while you went to 2 supers, and hosted 3 times, I guess. Not making the playoffs twice was the harder part. And now Mark's had a couple of years where he didn't make the playoffs either. Tournament, sorry. I like to say playoffs in baseball. But, this team's going to the postseason. So I get the comparisons in a relative standpoint. Stagnant? Yeah, I guess. I mean, you went back to the supers last year. Yeah. And I know people might go, well, yeah, Jay, but that's, kind of what we're supposed to do. And I understand that. But, again, you can't get to Omaha without getting to the supers. And so the
supers gets you in position to be able to do that.
While there was regression before that, you did progress last season again. And that's all you can do. Mm-hmm. You can't live too much in the past with it. I mean, you've got to get there again. And they did last year at that. So I felt like that was, again, you hosted and you advanced, and then you just ran into a really good Florida team who you had swept earlier in the season, which was kind of crazy. Yeah, because nobody ever sweeps Florida, it seems.
Right, and here's the wild thing too. We're still, and these are good discussions to have right now because we're putting a lot of things in perspective with the sweep, and I totally get it. But look, if something were to change and, you're getting what you got out of Garrett Gainey, but you're finishing out games, you're making the small adjustments with the bullpen to be able to squeeze out of jams and be able to start winning some of these games. If you do somehow end up taking 2 of 3 from Tennessee, you make a run in the SEC tournament, and you go back to the supers again this year, I don't think we're having much of a conversation about, changes in leadership or this type of things that we're discussing right now in terms of expectation. I think you would have exceeded it at that point compared to where we are right now, where, we had a texter talking about his goal for even men's basketball, football is to at least contend in the SEC. But he did mention, that an Ole Miss-esque run, like, the Ole Miss baseball team did, where they're the last team in and ended up winning the whole thing. Like, that kind of stuff in baseball happens, which is why I don't like judging I guess, programs solely on what you do in the postseason, especially in baseball because it's so random.
Right.
Like the Braves last year, won how many games and were the best hitting team in
108 or whatever.
the history of the sport?
Yeah.
You'll take that 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
You know? And what happens in October happens in October. Sometimes it's totally random and arbitrary, but that's just what you kind of have to live with. But I think you'd still feel pretty good if this team it did end up making, a pretty
And that's why I don't want to sit here today
right
and talk about what the longer term future looks like. Again, short and midterm. In other words, this weekend, do Ty Good and Garrett Gainey get into the rotation? Midterm, what I mean by that is, you're still going to the tournament. What does that begin to look like? Long term is anything beyond, and the season's not over.
No.
And like I said, for those of you who didn't hear me say it, twice in my career have I called for a coach to be removed during a season. And it was Darren Horns last year and Will Muschamp's last year. That's it. And those were untenable situations. This, to me, is not untenable. This weekend was horrible, brutal, ugly, gross, sickening, and many other things that you could label it, including some FCC stuff. But, you're still playing and you're still going to the tournament. This is the Postgame Show.
From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some delays on the roadways this afternoon. We'll start here in Richland County. An accident on I-20 westbound just after the Clemson Road exit. Exit 80 is causing some issue, as well as one on Old Hopkins Road at Garner's Ferry Road. We also have another accident on US 378. That's near Lower Richland Boulevard. And one on US 601 near Highway 262, looks like near Leesburg Road. In Lexington County, we have a couple of accidents, or at least an object on the roadway on I-20 eastbound that's causing some minor traffic backup. That's over near the Longs Pond Road exit 51. We also have one on Piney Grove Road at I-26 and one on Platte Springs Road near South Lake Drive.
Talking a lot of Carolina baseball after a tough weekend, to say the least, at Founders Park. Georgia coming in and winning 14-10, 11-5, and then 14-6. And that Saturday afternoon game, Carolina was up 6-4 in the eighth. You heard me right. And Georgia scored 10 unanswered in the final frames and went on to the weekend sweep. We just had somebody hit. Read the one about the crowd. We were just talking at the – just read the text, and then I'll explain for those who might have just tuned in.
The text reads, please don't let them blame it on the crowd. That's pitching and bad coaching.
Yeah. No one's doing that.
No.
And that text – or excuse me, that call was last week before the series started. It was just someone who said he'd been going to games for a long time, just asking my opinion as someone who's gone to games for a long time, if I felt like the atmosphere was as energetic as it has been in the past. And I said, no, it's not. But again, I think there's some people here, and I get it. Listen, I've talked to a few of you in the last couple of days.
And that's not why they've lost games.
No. Yeah. The energy or lack thereof this weekend wasn't it. Now, by Saturday, I think the crowd was lighter than you might have hoped for a Saturday afternoon 2 o'clock game, primarily because you had lost games 1 and 2. And at that point, you know, that sucks a lot of air out, man. It does. So, but that's not why they lost.
Yeah, I will say, even like the atmosphere was still pretty good.
Yeah,
for a game like that, you still had a good amount of tailgaters. I felt some good juice in the ballpark. It's just when you have an inning like the eighth that can take some juice out. You can get de-juiced pretty easily with an inning like you had in the eighth. That's a de-juicer. Yeah, no one's blaming crowd energy at all. I assure you. I mean, at least not here on this show. And again, I referenced a call that was placed to us before the series began. So there's that. Yeah, you got a couple more you like over there? Because, again, a lot of you hitting us today. So I do appreciate that on the Firehouse Subs text line. So I want to be fair to as many of you as possible. One person does say you can't guarantee a tournament berth if we lose the next 4 games. A nameless texter, but he does say you can't guarantee a tournament berth if we lose the next 4. Even though I will disagree a little bit because I think you've done enough right now. I think at this point you're just playing for seeding. And if you want to avoid being a 3, which, trust me, with some of the teams that are hovering in that 2-3 range, you don't want to be a 3. You don't want to be a 3 at all.
If you were to lose 4 in a row, let me get to it here, you'd be 33-22, technically 13-18 in the SEC. You'd be 9-10 in away games, 2-2 in neutral site games, and you'd be on a 7-game losing streak. I still think that gets you a 3 seed because your RPI isn't going to fall out of the top, say, 25.
Yeah.
I don't think.
No, I don't think so. Even if it is like 26, 27, you're pushing it. But look, as of right now, I looked through it today and I looked at the resumes of the teams that are ahead of you in the RPI. Yeah. And I wrote down as many teams as I can where I'm like, they have a better resume than you. Just Blind resume, theirs is flat out better than you. I got to 16 teams where the resume is just flat out better. And then there was another list of about 6 or 7 teams that are going to be put in over you, so we can have, a even distribution of teams that are hosting, right? Like your UC Santa Barbara's, they're like, those teams just win so much, and they have just overall good records where even if they don't have the same quality wins and I guess better losses than you do, they're still going to be picked in over you. And those, that's Indiana State, East Carolina, Oregon State, UC Santa Barbara, Dallas Baptist, San Diego. Those teams will be picked in over you. And after all those teams written down, I have you as about the number 23 best resume in the country. Yeah. And that tracks because you're still going to be ranked this season in D1 Baseball's poll. You're still going to be ranked in almost every other poll. So that would track that you have about the 23rd, 24th, 25th best resume in the country. Losing to the number 1 team in the country in a series next weekend probably won't change that fact. It makes your resume less appealing because the tournament committee likes teams that not only win games but wins a majority of their games regardless of who they play. But they're not going to punish you for that. And you will get dinged if you go one and done in Hoover because more than likely you're playing a team like Florida who is fighting for their life to get in. It's more than likely you're playing Florida or Ole Miss or a team like that is kind of sitting on the bubble a little bit. I think Ole Miss has kind of played themselves out a little after winning a series against Texas A&M. But if you lose that will be, kind of is what dings you a little bit going into the regional. Mm-hmm. But even then, that might get you a third seed, a high-end third seed.
Yeah, I don't envision South Carolina missing the tournament.
Yeah.
You've
done too much.
Yeah, you've done too much. I mean, you played a very difficult schedule. You have tons of quad 1 games under your belt. You still got a lot of quad 1 wins. Now again, if Vandy were to fall out and you lose those quad 1s, so there's still some fluidity there. But even if you lose the Vandy ones, you're still going to have played well over 20 quad 1 games. This team's going to the tournament.
Yeah,
it's just not going to host anymore. And that hurts.
And you're going to have a very unfavorable draw, right? And somebody, let's see, Craig, texted in and said, Jay, if we are swept and lose in Hoover and Vandy not being a quad 1 sweep, I don't know if they make it.
I get the concern.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
do. But this,
you don't want to go in falling rear backwards on an 8-game losing streak going into the regional, and I totally get that. Yeah. But if you just look, because Vandy's not a quad 1 win right now, right, and you still have 9 quad 1 wins, and you're looking at the teams that are going to be 3 seeds in this. Yeah. You blow their resumes out of the water, right? You still have a top 25 resume, even with Vanderbilt not being a quad 1 win.
Yeah. I get why some of you feel that way, but I would be incredibly surprised, shocked even. So I mean, I guess like anything in life, is there a chance? Yeah, but I mean, boy, not only would you have to get swept this weekend, I think you'd have to be humbled again.
Multiple run rules.
And again, not do well. I just don't see it, though. I just don't. Even that, I'm sitting here I'm almost trying to convince myself of how, and I just can't.
Yeah.
The resume's too good already. You've already done enough. And like I said, you'd end up finishing, under 500 in league play, obviously, but that's probably going to happen now anyway. Mm-hmm. But you'd be 11 games over 500 for the year with a top 20 strength of schedule, over 20 quad 1 games played.
Double-digit quad 1 wins if Vanderbilt is to end up taking the series from Kentucky. And
even still, you got a lot. You got some really nice. Yeah, you've done enough. You've done enough. They're going to the tournament. They're just not going to do it in Columbia. And then what you hope is they don't do it in Clemson or Chapel Hill.
Exactly. Because you're going to get an unfavorable draw.
Yeah. And you won't be sent to a Southeastern Conference school. So
no.
You'll go somewhere other than your own league.
And here's another stat too for those that are worried that you're going to miss the tournament. South Carolina is 24-3 in non-quad 1 games. When you have a strength of schedule that's number 10 in the country, what the committee is going to look at is how well you played in the games that you're supposed to win.
Right.
You're supposed to win your non-quad 1 games. And when you're 24-3 in said games, that proves that you dominate against teams that you should beat, right? So I think that bodes really well for them because there's a lot of teams here when we get to the weeds of who's barely a 2, who's barely a 3, that don't have that attribute.
What are those 3 losses? Belmont, Georgia Southern, Florida?
Yes.
Okay.
Belmont, Georgia Southern, Florida. But if you look at a lot of other teams that are going to be scratching, and clawing for that, like look at Florida's resume, for example. Outside of the quad one, they have 15 wins and 9 losses. They're 15-9. And that still might be good enough to get them in, despite their number 1 overall strength of schedule.
Right.
Even though they are sitting at 26-25, they're going to be sitting on the fence of just getting into this thing.
And that committee is going to be going, it's Florida.
Yep. And they're going to be like, ooh, well, and the one thing that could keep them out, that's 9 losses outside the quad one. They're a little over 500 outside of those. Like, those are the things that are going to be considered. I just think South Carolina's resume is so good right now. Not like so good, but it's good enough to where you're solidified in, despite a disastrous end to your season. Because they're going to look at the whole picture, right? Now, if you, we'll have to take a break, but there's still a lot to like about the resume, even if you don't love the resume.
Yeah. Lots more on Carolina baseball. Let you hear from Coach Kingston coming up next hour, too. A couple of national things to get to as the postgame show continues. Welcome back into the postgame show. Headlines of the day coming up for you, top of the 5, including a couple things out of the National Football League and women's college basketball. Those are all coming up for you in just a bit, and we'll let you hear what Mark Kingston had to say coming up at 5:15. A few more. Again, a lot of you texting in. We can't get to all of them, but I really want to be as fair as possible as we discuss a lot of the issues going on around Carolina baseball. So what you got?
We got a text from our friend Susan who says, I asked you all last Friday, is this a team with SEC caliber players, especially pitchers? You would not answer the question directly. I think this weekend answered that question. Georgia gets a new coach, and we have a 6-year coach. What is wrong with that picture?
Yeah. Well, we did answer the question. Yeah. I mean, they have a lot of really good players at South Carolina. I think Susan knows that.
Yeah.
We also
why you win double-digit games in the SEC.
Yeah,
You're still at least in the middle of the pack, the SEC.
We also said that the pitching left something to be desired, and we knew that too, because we basically said that they are who they are. I think if I recall, Susan said she was on her phone at Lowe's, so maybe she didn't get to hear everything we were saying. We did answer the question direct. I mean, look, Susan, I can't tell you what magic formula, I'm air quoting, Georgia may have hit. Again, Charlie Condon came out of almost nowhere to do what he's doing. Kind of like Ethan Petrie last year, and Carolina made it to the Supers. I don't know what Georgia's ceiling is. But Ethan Petrie is, I mean, Susan, I hope you understand, Ethan Petrie is a quality SEC player.
Yes.
Cole Messina is a quality SEC player. Kennedy Jones is proving he's a quality SEC player.
Cole Messina is the best catcher in the country.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to like about this team, and there's a lot to be concerned about. But like I said, this team is not – this team is going to the tournament. That doesn't mean everything's okay. And I understand, y'all. Again, I'm a lifer. I understand the importance that fans place upon this baseball program. I was telling Elijah earlier, when I was a little kid, Carolina went to the World Series in 75, 77, 81, 82, 85. It became rather common. And then they didn't go for 17 years. And I remember thinking, because a couple of my buddies went in 85 with their parents. And, I was going to summer camp a lot back then, and I was like, well, I'll get to go because we go. And I didn't actually go to the World Series until the 04 trip. So I understand that there is more. There's a higher level of expectation around the baseball program, but they got a lot of really good baseball players over there. They do not have enough pitching, but we knew they didn't have enough pitching before the Georgia series. What we saw Georgia do as the hottest team in the country right now was expose that to an even larger degree. That's what we saw. And that's what makes today hard. That's why today we're reacting almost like a really bad football loss. We would not typically have Carolina baseball driving the entire show. But we understood the importance of what this series did to Carolina because it took you out of a hosting spot. But it didn't take you out of the tournament. And you already knew you needed to go get better pitching. And you've got a new pitching coach. I had somebody hit me earlier and say, well, Mark can't keep a pitching coach. Skylar Meade went on to be a head coach. And Justin Parker left last year for Mississippi State because Mississippi State offered him a whole lot more money. And as I understand it, Carolina was willing to go up, but State went way up. And Matt Williams has a really good reputation. But enough's not happening right now. Nobody's denying that. But, I mean, Susan, if you and people of your ilk are going to basically turn this team into a team that misses the tournament or is just horrible, I can't help you. I can't. Now, again, let me say too, I'm not here today to talk about the long-term future because that's irresponsible.
Season's incomplete.
Yeah.
It's Long Beach State learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah, in basketball. Right. Yeah.
They fired Dan Munson and he took him to the tournament.
Again, if this was something where Carolina was, worse than what Missouri is right now, we might be, and you've just been humbled like that at home, maybe today's conversation is different. But again, this team is going to the NCAA tournament.
And still time to turn things around.
And you could still, while it is now a very long shot, there is an opportunity to work your way back into the top 16.
Certainly.
You know, it's a very long shot. And I'm not, if you want to hold out hope for it, cool. If you think that that's just a bunch of hot air, cool.
I'm filled with hot air.
I'm not here to tell you how to feel. But, Susan, there's a lot of good baseball players over there, and they've won a lot of good games. And this weekend, they were humbled. And that sucks if you're a fan.
Mm-hmm.
It does. I get it. And maybe the whole conversation is different if just you win one of them.
Oh, I guarantee you it is. The big S word is why the conversation has gotten to where it's gotten.
Yeah, there was one sweep this weekend, and it was you on the wrong side. Headlines of the day, what Mark Kingston had to say, drive around the SEC, and more coming up.
Talk a lot about the baseball team's goals today, and you still have some of your goals ahead of you in terms of maybe trying to get to a super regional, but my friends at Columbia Secret for Weight Loss helped me achieve a personal goal, one that was really close to me. I wanted to be able to shed 15 to 20 pounds and to be able to, I guess, enjoy myself physically a little bit, right? I had a goal to lose that weight, and Paul Grant and Shaylin over at Columbia Secret for Weight Loss helped me not just achieve that goal, but be able to get in better eating habits, living habits, and make myself feel a whole lot better for a more sustainable lifestyle. And they can do the same for you. Just give them a call, 803-824-4210. Again, 803-824-4210 to learn the secret of losing up to 1 pound of unhealthy fat per day and start your own success story. Just like me, you can also go to ColumbiaSecretForWeightLoss.com. Again, that's ColumbiaSecretForWeightLoss.com. From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways this afternoon. We'll start here in Richland County. We have two, it looks like, one on US 601 near Highway 262 in Leesburg Road, and one on US 378 near Lower Richland Boulevard. Those are both causing some mild traffic backup. And Lexington County, we have three. We'll start with one on Platte Springs Road near South Lake Drive. a disabled vehicle that's causing traffic to move on the slower side on Piney Grove Road at I-26. And lastly, an object on the roadway on I-20 eastbound is causing some traffic back up over near the Longs Pond Road exit 51.
It is 5 o'clock news time on this Monday. It's also the final hour of the postgame show. Welcome back in along with Elijah Campbell. I'm Jay Phillips. We're in downtown Herndon Chevy Studios. Wherever you are, appreciate you being with us. We have spent a large portion of the day, dare I say most of the day, discussing Carolina baseball's series sweep at the hands of the Georgia Bulldogs. UGA coming to Columbia, winning 14-10 Thursday night, 11-5 Friday night, 14-6. On Saturday afternoon. That series finale had the Gamecocks up 6-4 in the 8th inning, and Georgia, as you can do the math on, scored 10 unanswered. Mark Kingston had this to say, cut one, Elijah, and postgame.
Well, Georgia played their ass off all weekend, and we did not. So for 7 innings today, I thought we were going to win that game. Gainey did great, did exactly what we thought he would in the starting role, and then obviously it all fell in on us those last 2 innings. So got to be better from that, and we will.
South Carolina has Tennessee Thursday, Friday, Saturday in Knoxville. Tennessee, the number 1 team in the D1 baseball poll. They took 2 of 3 this past weekend from Vanderbilt. We'll see how the RPI shakes out by the time we get to that one. And we'll let you hear Mark Kingston, who was on with Elijah and me in the first hour, coming up in just a little bit. We've talked a lot today. This series loss and sweep, certainly for now, takes South Carolina out of the hosting spots in the NCAA tournament. I think there is a path back, but it is a very rocky, not well-worn path, if I want to stay with that kind of analogy.
Yeah, it's potentially turbulent.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy.
It's not, and that's unfortunate, but this is where it is. But and for those who maybe have just tuned in, listen, I get it. There's a lot of people out there, I don't know what the percentages are, that would like to be talking about the long-term future of this baseball program. When the time is right, we will do that. But for a team that is going to the tournament, I don't know that now is that time. I get why some of you feel the way you feel. I've spoken with some of you. I have gone back and forth on Twitter with a couple of you. We've had some hits on the text line. A lot of the hits on the text line really are more about the here and now too. But not doing the long-term thing until the season's done. If this was, as I've mentioned before a couple times today, the only 2 times I've done that in season are when Darren Horn was going nowhere and Will Muschamp was going nowhere. And you realize that those were untenable. I do not believe this situation is untenable. It is not ideal. And it's not even, I think, if you don't host this year after being in position to host, then you can deem it as a disappointment. And where you, the individual fan, place disappointment and failure is up to you. But it would be, you could see it as a failure. I don't have a problem with that because
Fair assessment.
You controlled your fate. Now you maybe do a little bit, but not really. You need help. And I don't know who's giving you that help and what that help looks like. Because, again, you're not trying to get in.
Because you're in.
Yeah, you're in. You want to host. And I just think all you did was get past. Again, like Wake Forest sweeping Clemson. Wake's hosting now. Georgia was right there with you. Now Georgia has raced past you, obviously. Again, Mississippi State is in a nice position, but State didn't win their series this weekend. So maybe you need help from them. I don't know. You need to go win some baseball games if you want to host. And I do think that's a long shot.
Yeah, because other teams around you, like we went through last week, the teams that you need to cheer for to help get favorable position. Obviously, South Carolina is the number one team you should cheer for if you want the Gamecocks to host a regional.
Sure.
Wake Forest didn't do you any favors because they swept Clemson. Georgia Tech helped you out a little bit by taking the series from Duke, but Utah didn't do you any favors from losing at home in a series to Arizona, a team that is now on your tail, and they're going to be side-by-side comparisons of resumes because you are of similar ilk right now, and that didn't help you out a ton. But there are a lot of things that did not fall into place nationally that kind of throws a little bit of salt in the wound of getting swept at home.
One more from Coach Kingston before, again, you hear his interview with us today. This is from Postgame Saturday Cut 2. Elijah, what did he say to the team right after the loss?
Both, a little bit of both. I talked to him about how this game was not meant to pat you on the back. This is a game built on failure that will beat you up, give you a lot of highs and give you a lot of lows, and you need to handle it properly. And this game will make a man out of you if you play it long enough. And this was one of those weekends that we took a lot of gut punches that we got to make sure we grow from and become tougher from. Again, tip my cap to Georgia. It's amazing what they've done. They've turned that program around in very short order thanks to the transfer portal. It's probably the best offense we saw all year, and we've got to pitch better regardless of who we're playing.
And you'll hear what Mark had to say. Elijah and I both asked him questions about potential rotation shakeups, defensive lineups, et cetera. That's coming up for you in just a few. So sit tight. You'll hear more of what Coach Mark Kingston had to say. Meanwhile, continuing our integrated media headlines of the day from around the country, NFL news, Jared Goff just became the highest paid Detroit Lion in the history of that franchise. Goff signing a 4-year, $212 million extension with $170 million of that guaranteed. I don't know how to do all the salary cap stuff, but that $212 over 4 years comes out to way more than $50 million per. That's like 20% of the salary cap, right? That's a lot.
That's a very large chunk of the salary cap for Jared Goff.
So, I mean, they've been a great story. Mm-hmm. And
he's been a good story himself. He was sent to Detroit to die.
Yeah, basically, right? It's like, you went to the Super Bowl, but you weren't very good, and we'd rather have the guy that was there. And then that guy won the Super Bowl, so it was clearly a better move for the Rams. Mm-hmm. But now Goff's got them playing. They're fun, man.
In the history of mutually beneficial trades, that's going to be up in the pantheon of mutually beneficial trades.
Yeah.
It almost never works that way.
No,
for both
it doesn't,
sides.
man. It doesn't.
But it did for them.
Yeah, it's good. But anyway, congratulations to Jared Goff, the highest paid Detroit Lion ever. Speaking of highest paid, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Antoine Winfield have agreed to a 4-year, $84 million contract. It makes Mr. Winfield the highest paid defensive back in NFL history. It includes $45 million guaranteed, the most ever given to a safety. Highest paid in terms of the actual number. I'd love to go back and look at some inflationary things on that. I mean, he's really good. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, like when Troy Polamalu signed his last deal, or when Ronnie Lott signed his last deal, or Dion signed his last deal. I mean, like, I just like to see the inflation numbers and where it matches up because
relative to what other players.
Well, this is kind of like when like a movie, like, oh, it's the highest grossing movie ever, and I was like, well, adjust it for inflation, please, and then it like drops to like 20th, and I'm like, all right, thanks.
And also, it's the highest grossing movie for the next 20 minutes because the next movie that comes out will be the next highest grossing movie ever.
I mean, but like, how many of you have really passed, like, Gone with the Wind and Star Wars? And the answer is like one of those Marvel movies did or something.
Right. It's a very small number.
Yeah. So anyway, congratulations though to Antoine Winfield Jr. and to Jared Goff. Don't forget the little people.
That's right.
Not necessarily me. Just don't forget the little people. NBA. Last night, or I guess yesterday afternoon and last night, the Indiana Pacers evened the series with the Knicks, and they didn't just even it. Did the Knicks know what time the game was, man?
They did, but all 6 of them that actually get to play because they are, I'm telling you, they are in a bad shape in terms of depth. If they don't get OG Anunoby back, they are in trouble.
Well, the reason I ask is because first quarter was 34-14, and I was like, man, the Knicks thought it was like an hour later, and they just had to run in, and one of the dudes didn't have his shoes tied, or Thibodeau only had like 4 guys on the floor because 2 of the other guys were still at the hotel.
And so my team's on the floor. He Norman Daled them. It was ugly.
121-89 was the final. Meanwhile, the Denver Nuggets did what most of us expected them to do, whether the Timberwolves want to agree with it or not. Denver went to the Twin Cities and won both games. Yesterday, winning 115-107. I thought they would do this. I genuinely did.
Yeah.
Now, if the T-Wolves can go back to Denver and win a game, then we're going 7 for sure.
Which they can also do because they defend so well.
Yeah, they can. They can.
And the Nuggets did shoot almost 70% in that first half. And, if you remember what happened at the end of the first half where Jamal Murray gets a steal and throws up a prayer from beyond half court and drills it to cap off an 8-0 run in 30 seconds, that made a pretty big difference towards the end of the game. You could argue that the Timberwolves were just as good in stretches last night.
Tonight, the Celtics are at Cleveland, up 2-1. The Thunder in Dallas, down 2-1. And also last night, congratulations to the Atlanta Hawks.
Oh, my goodness. It's so funny that a franchise that has never won the NBA draft lottery, but has made it a habit of living in the draft lottery, finally wins one when they're at 3% chance of winning one, but it's the least desirable NBA draft lottery since 2000.
Trade it.
So, congrats.
Trade it.
Trade it with Trae Young. You can get a haul for that. Because if I'm Atlanta, I traded Trae Young yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. I just don't think you're maxing out with him on the roster. Good player, but I think you can turn him into a lot of assets, and you can really Sam Presti this thing. I mean, look what the Thunder did.
Yeah.
Trading Paul George. You want to talk about the team that's at 1 seed in the West, and they traded an overvalued player for like 5 draft picks, and 3 of those turned into key contributors and starters on your team now.
Which is probably about the best you could hope for.
One of whom finished second in MVP voting.
Right.
A draft pick he got in that trade. The Hawks can do something very similar to Trae Young and this number 1 pick.
And still nobody in Atlanta will really care.
You have to be really good in Atlanta for them to care. It's been since 2015, I would say, since they realistically cared when they won almost 60 games in the regular season.
Yeah, did they even really care, though? I don't know if they did, man. I'm telling you, y'all can't see me unless you're watching on YouTube. There's Georgia Bulldog football way up here in Atlanta, and the Braves are just a notch below that. And then it's like everything else. Mm-hmm. Even the Falcons. Sorry, Falcon fans, but I'm right.
Yeah.
The Hawks.
The one Falcons game I went to, there were as many Saints fans.
I'm pretty sure it's like, again, Georgia Bulldog football, Braves, Gap, Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United, Hawks.
Hey, Atlanta United sells out.
And
that
sometimes Atlanta United, it might go above the Falcons depending on the week.
I'd say they give the Falcons a run for their money.
Yeah. Lastly, in our drive around, or excuse me, not in our drive around, in our integrated media headlines of the day, call it savvy timing. Coach Lisa Bluter, after 24 years, is retiring as women's basketball coach at Iowa. Why is that news? Well, of course, because she just had Caitlin Clark, and they went to a couple of championship games. I'd get out now, too, to be perfectly honest with you. She said, it's been the honor of my career to be part of the Iowa Hawkeye family and lead the women's basketball program filled with so many talented and remarkable young women. It ain't ever going to get better than it just was. And it may, after 24 years, you may as well go ahead and do it and let somebody else start over. Because there won't be another Caitlin Clark coming through that door anytime soon. But congratulations to Coach Bluter on a nice career. That's our integrated media headlines of the day, 803-948-8327 for all of your home entertainment needs, including, now's a great time to get one of those outdoor systems installed. Enjoy the outdoor weather. Enjoy your favorite teams or movies with the kids outside. Get ready for football season, which will be here soon enough. No job too big, no job too small. Even, you got one of those video doorbells and you don't know how to put it in. Call Integrated Media. I had somebody call me today, say, hey, I just got a whole new internet service. I need Integrated Media. I hooked them up. They'll make everything right, just like that. 803-948-8327. You will love what they do for you. Integrated Media. What Mark Kingston had to say to Elijah and me coming up right after this. Welcome back into the postgame show on this Monday afternoon. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. Let's jump right in. Coach Mark Kingston joined us for his regular Monday visit back in the 3 o'clock hour, and we start here with his answer to my question about having to just flush what was a horrible weekend at Founders Park.
Well, you have no choice. You flush it. You understand the big picture. We've had some great weekends, and obviously this was our low point of the year, and so you've got to handle it properly. You've got to move on, and you've got to focus on Tennessee. You don't belabor the point that we didn't play as well as we wanted. You learn the things that you need to learn. You make the adjustments you need to make, and you focus on Tennessee and keep the train moving. That's all you can do.
You mentioned, and I'll quote you, you said Georgia played their ass off and we didn't, and you also noted that the Bulldogs maybe are the best offense that you've seen this season. So there's that about how well you thought Georgia played. But I am curious as to how you and Coach Williams have been, I don't want to ask you more privately assessing your pitching staff, but have you seen chinks in the armor? Have you seen some of the things that led to Georgia being so explosive against your pitchers?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to find predictability within our pitching staff, and we've got a lot of guys that are very capable and have had great moments. We're just looking for the guys that will be the most predictable, where we know generally what we're going to get when they go out there. We've been a little inconsistent, and because of that, we've had to change roles of guys. We're trying to find who fits best where, and we're just continuing to look for the guys to really take hold of a role when they get the opportunity. And as I said, I think many of them have the ability to do it. We just need to continue to work to get there. But yeah, that was the best offense we've seen all year, from top to bottom, power wise. They didn't run, they don't bunt, they just get in there and they bang. And they did it all weekend, and I didn't expect us to give up that many runs. I expected us to give up some runs because they score on everybody, and they've done that to most teams. But I just didn't expect it to get to that point. And then especially in Game 3, when we're up by 2 going to the 8th inning, I felt really good that game was going to be won by us. And, we didn't pitch well in the last couple innings, and they finished strong. So their RPI is number 2 in the country right now. It's one of the best teams in the country, but I still hold out hope that we are as well. And we just got to keep looking for that winning form.
And speaking of, the pitching staff, you can't help but notice exactly how well Garrett pitched out from a starting role, going 5 1/3 and striking out 7, only walking 1, and only giving up two earned. I thought he pitched really well in that role, and I know that's something that you guys have considered for a little bit, but I've kept him in the bullpen because that's how I guess Matt felt that he pitched best out of. But it does kind of feel like he's your best pitcher right now. Is this a role that you see him sticking with moving forward in terms of continuing to start and maybe try to get you deeper into ball games?
There's no question that him and Ty Good, I think, have been our best and most consistent 2 pitchers. Though the key is, okay, if he starts, then who's going to finish the game? Or if one guy finishes the game, who's going to start? And that's been our challenge. Gainey has helped us win so many games in the role he was in. He pitched in a manner yesterday, Saturday, that allowed us to win that game too. So we have to just figure out what is the best combination of 9 innings for us to get a W. And as we look into the Tennessee weekend, that we're going to approach that one way. But then as we look into the future, into the NCAA tournament, you've got to win 3 games on a weekend, and we're going to attack all the different ways that we might be able to approach winning 3 games on a weekend for the regional. So there's no question he pitched like a dominant starter the other day. And that's what I thought would happen, and it did. So we've got to gain enough confidence that if he does go to that starting role, we're going to have guys that can slam the door shut once he hands the ball to us with a lead.
Talking to Coach Mark Kingston on this Monday. Jay and Elijah with you. Carolina will be at Tennessee this weekend to close out the regular season. Thursday and Friday, 6:30 starts Saturday afternoon from Knoxville. You told us last week that Dylan Eskew might have had a little soreness in Columbia, Missouri, and maybe he's just not giving you what you want. Roman Kimball obviously coming off surgery a couple years ago, trying to work his way back. In your opinion, you've been around this sport a long time, how much of this is fatigue? How much of this is ability? And how do you and Matt try? I mean, you mentioned earlier you're trying to find those roles, but it's one thing that for a guy that doesn't have ability. It's one when a guy does have ability and he's struggling with confidence. Where are those fine lines for you guys especially this late in the season.
Yeah, I think those two guys have the ability to pitch in the roles that we've asked them to do. Again, SQ shut out Kentucky a couple weeks ago, and they're the number one ranked team in the country from an RPI standpoint. So he's more than capable of getting us 6 outs like we asked him to do the other day. He got us many more than that when he shut out Kentucky. And we just thought, okay, let's give him the ball, let him get his 6 outs, assume he'll pitch like he did in that Kentucky series. And it just didn't work out. Doesn't mean it won't work out the next time. But again, we're trying to figure out where our guy's most comfortable. Maybe he's more comfortable early in the game rather than late. And everybody's personality leads itself to some guys like the middle, some guys like the beginning, some guys like the end. Some guys are so talented that you can pitch them anywhere and they'll do great. So it's a combination of all those things, but I think, again, we've got to get those guys comfortable in whatever role they are so that we get the best out of them.
Talking with Coach Mark Kingston, and Mark, batting-wise, you guys still were able to put up enough runs that would normally win you some games in the SEC. So, averaging 7 runs a game in a weekend series in this conference would still put you in the upper half in terms of offensive production. And I guess when the pitching's struggling like it has, it can put a lot of pressure and strain on your hitting lineup. But how do you think your lineup has been able to handle that pressure here in these last few games?
No, the offense over the last month has been very good. There's no question about that. We average 7 runs a game, as you mentioned, this weekend. That's plenty good enough to win games if we're pitching the way we normally do. And so I'm pleased with where the offense has come. I think it's one of the better offenses around now as it's currently constructed. And I still think it can get better with some more consistency from a few guys. But I think the offense is doing more than enough. And again, early in the year, the pitchers were pulling their weight, and as we were waiting for the offense to come around, and now it's a little bit of a flip of that. But at the end of the day, when we lace them up to play in the NCAA tournament, you hope that they're both really at the top of their game, and that's what we're targeting.
You got Will Tippett back to a couple of games this weekend, so he's feeling better. What does that do in terms of maybe how you practice this week? You guys will leave on Wednesday to start a Thursday through Saturday series, so still fluid there, or will you go back? You made that trade-off of defense for offense. How's that looking right now?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jay. I mean, it's something we're evaluating. Obviously, when LeCroy was in there at short, he made all the routine plays, and generally is going to give us pretty consistent at bats, although he's been struggling some lately. But I always hold out hope and think positive that our guys will reach their best form. Tippett has more range at shortstop defensively, so you just have to balance which one are you looking for on any given day. Do you want more range on defense? Do you want more quality at bats? Because both of those guys bring different things to the table. So, we'll evaluate who we're pitching in terms of how many ground balls we may get on a given day, or are we throwing a fly ball pitcher? We'll evaluate who we're facing from the other team, and is it a fly ball team, a ground ball team? So we'll factor in all those things. I think the other 8 guys are pretty consistent in the fact that they need to be in the lineup with the way they're swinging the bats. So that position right there is something we'll continue to evaluate. But again, they both bring different things to the table, and it's just which do we think is more important on that day.
When do you think you and Coach Williams decide on who goes when this weekend from a starting rotation standpoint?
Well, we already started to talk about it this morning because, again, how they throw throughout the course of the week has a lot to do with when they pitch on the weekend. So we already discussed that this morning. I would guess we'll make it public, probably Wednesday on our way to Tennessee. But that'll be here soon enough.
And lastly, real quick, is there any conversation at all amongst the team, that's staff, players, about the hosting situation or that's taken a hit, if nothing else, this past weekend? Or is it something that's a known that isn't spoken of?
Obviously the guys follow everything just like everybody else does. They know that we were within the top 16 of the RPI, which means you're going to host. And now we're just outside the top 16 of the RPI. So, I mean, guys aren't stupid. They follow things. They know. You don't need to talk about it. I mean, everybody, at the end of the day, everybody's job is to work hard and try to win the next game. And if you do that enough, then you get to host. And if you don't, then you don't. It's pretty much that simple.
That's Mark Kingston joining us. And again, if you'd like to hear anything else that Coach had to say, you can find it on the podcast page, 1075thegame.com, or on the app. We'll come back with a drive around the SEC. Mark mentioned Carolina falling out of the top 16 of the RPI. Where are they, especially in relation to others in the SEC and ACC as we get closer to the tournament? We'll get into that for you. And I guess there's a little more concern from some about Carolina really being a tournament team. We'll discuss all that as the drive around the SEC comes at you. And speaking of Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union, we all need banking services, checking, savings, credit cards, car loans, mortgage, whatever it might be. When you can do it and save money, which means keep more of your money in your pocket, isn't that a good thing? Well, unlike big banks, when you save with Palmetto Citizens, it stays locally in the Midlands. They don't pay stockholders. They don't loan or invest money in other states or countries. That means lower rates and fewer fees for their members. Your dollars stay in the Midlands to support your neighbors, to support local businesses that you also like going to, as well as local charities. So whether, again, it's a checking account, a savings account, maybe getting the kids started with something to help them manage their money a little bit better, or putting the kids through school, or modernizing the house with a home equity line. Any and all of your banking needs can be done at Palmetto Citizens. My wife and I are customers. We love them. Check them out online and learn more for any and all that they do at palmettocitizens.org and achieve your potential.
From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to report to you that are causing some issues on the roadways this afternoon, and we'll start with a big one here in Richland County. A disabled vehicle has the right lane completely blocked, and that's going to be over on I-26 westbound just after the Columbia Avenue exit 91. We also have more minor accidents that are causing more minor delays. One on Atlas Road near US 76 and Garners Ferry Road, and one on Bluff Road at Highway 48 near Highway 16 and Rosewood Drive. Staying here in Richland County, we have two more, one on US 378 near Lower Richland Boulevard and one on US 601 near Highway 262 and Leesburg Road. And Lexington County, we still have an accident over on Platte Springs Road near South Lake Drive.
It is Drive Around the SEC time. Welcome back in. Jay and Elijah with you. We'll continue with our baseball discussion. Tennessee took 2 of 3 from Vanderbilt this weekend. Yeah, of course, the Gamecocks going to Tennessee. That series loss for the Commodores does hurt Carolina just a little. We'll explain in a second. Kentucky took 2 of 3 at Florida. Alabama takes 2 of 3 from LSU. Arkansas, 2 of 3 over Mississippi State. And Ole Miss did themselves a little bit of good, taking 2 of 3 from Texas A&M. All of those series, again, had implications for each team that was playing in them. Here's how the standings look at this point in time in conference play. Kentucky gets to 20. They're the only team at that mark so far. They're the surprise of the year, but they are 20-7. This is conference records only. Tennessee 19-8. Georgia with the sweep here in Columbia goes to 16-11, drops the Gamecocks to 13-14. Vandy 12-15. Florida 11-16. Missouri is 8-19 on the year. Missouri, by the way, I didn't mention them. They played Auburn. Auburn took 2 of 3, and that's the 2 last place teams. So
the Toilet Bowl,
something like that. Arkansas is 19-8 out west. A&M 17-10. Mississippi State is 15-12. Maybe of late here, passing South Carolina in hosting opportunity is Mississippi State. Alabama 12-15. Ole Miss 11-16. LSU 10-17. Auburn is 6-21. So here's the RPI. Right now, I'm going to give you the SEC teams in the top 30 of the RPI. Kentucky is 1, A&M is 2, Georgia is 3, Arkansas is 4, Tennessee is 6, Alabama is 11, State is 16, Carolina is 19, Ole Miss is 24, Vandy is 28, and Florida is 29. It is my opinion that each of those teams I just read to you is in good to okay shape. Again, Ole Miss and Florida have great RPI, but they don't have great records. Ole Miss is 27-24 overall. Florida is 26-25 overall. They could be on the outside looking in. Ole Miss currently, though, has 12 quad 1 wins. Florida currently has 11 quad 1 wins. It's going to be, and Florida has the toughest strength of schedule in the country. Mississippi has the second toughest schedule in the country. There's a lot of metrics in their favor. A few of you have just hit Elijah and me here of late saying, why are you two so sure when others on your station aren't so sure about Carolina going to the tournament? Well, at this point, I am sure. Now, look, we said we had the caveat. If you were to end the season on a 7-game losing streak, it might damage you. But even then, I think you've done enough to get in with your record. At that point, your record, you'd still be 11 over 500 overall. Depending on what Vandy does, you could have anywhere from 9 to 12 quad 1 wins. I think South Carolina, and you've got 6 quad 2 wins at this point. 3 of those are Vanderbilt wins. So, again, those could shift. But in terms of quad 1, quad 2, that's nearly half of your wins. The committee will look favorably upon that. I don't think South Carolina is going to miss the tournament. Mm-hmm. I think this team's going to the tournament. if you want to be that guy and call in here in a couple of weeks if they don't and say something, okay. But I just think the resume is strong enough. And I think the resume may be strong enough for Florida and Mississippi. I don't know. The difference, again, Mississippi's got 12 quad one wins, but they got 17 quad one losses. Florida has 11 quad one wins. They got 16 quad one losses. The difference for those two, or at least for Florida, they got 6 quad two losses. Ole Miss has 3 quad 3 losses. There are anchors on their resume that South Carolina does not have, despite all these teams being in the top 30 of the RPI. So, I think there's going to be 10 schools that go. I think Carolina's one of them. I think Florida and Ole Miss might need to have a nice weekend and maybe do a little bit in Hoover. But these are all opinions based on the facts that are out there. If you are more cynical, or dare I say, there may be a very, very, very small faction of Carolina baseball fans that would just as soon see the team miss the tournament because they think that may further advance their ultimate cause. I can't help you. I know that's what some sports fans do, regardless of team or level. I just think South Carolina's baseball resume to this point is good enough. And again, unless you just completely go out in a blaze of disaster, I think you're going to make the NCAA tournament.
Even with a blaze of disaster, I think you're going to get somewhat of the benefit of the doubt. Because look, assuming you do, even if you do lose every game from here on out, so it's going to be 3 quad 1 losses to the number 1 team in the country, and then what would be considered a bad loss to a team like Florida or Ole Miss in the SEC tournament. But even then, that will be a quad 1 loss because on a neutral field, it's 1-40.
Yep.
And outside of Auburn and Missouri, pretty much every SEC team is 1-40 in the RPI. So that will be a quad 1 loss as well. That would make you 9-19 in quad 1, assuming Vanderbilt isn't upgraded.
Right.
And if it is, then that's 12-19. And you're still 24-3 in non-quad 1 games. You'd still have a top 10 strength of schedule. You'd still have 33 wins. And with, there being 32 automatic bids, meaning there will be 32 at-large bids given, I just don't foresee a scenario in which there are 32 better resumes going into this tournament at large than that.
I agree.
As of right now, if you look at it, I went through today and I counted all the resumes that I would rather have than South Carolina's on paper. And I got to 22. And that's not even including some of those teams that will be automatic qualifiers because they're going to win their conference tournament.
Right.
So it'll be 1 SEC team, 1 Big West team. The Big West will probably get 2 or 3. 1 WCC team, which will be probably San Diego unless there's a bid thief. But I think you're even almost bid thief proof at that point. You don't want to mess around and find out. You never want to play that game. But I'm saying if you do end up messing around, I think the finding out portion might be better to you than a lot of people think.
Here's how the weekend looks, by the way. Florida will be at Georgia, Vandy at Kentucky, Carolina at Tennessee, as we've mentioned, Bama at Auburn, Ole Miss at LSU, Missouri at Mississippi State. That's fortuitous for the Bulldogs. Arkansas at A&M. That's interesting. I think both of them are top 8, but hey, may as well see them play. That's it. There you go. So that's the weekend.
Pretty good slate.
Yeah. And this past weekend was fun, man. A lot of, there's a lot of fluidity there as we keep using that word, but there's a lot of teams in the top 30 of the RPI. And again, I don't want to say I don't care how you feel. I try to be a nicer guy than that.
I care how you feel.
So I do care how you feel, but I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to give you my opinion, again, based on what I see on paper or on a computer screen when it comes to the facts, the genuine facts, the results, and the analytics. And they all point to Carolina just dropping from the 1 seed line to the 2 seed line. Mm-hmm. Now, again, keep losing, maybe. But you got 30-something at-larges. And Elijah asked me off air a little while ago, are you really thinking there's going to be that many teams that can just suddenly pass South Carolina? No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
And here's the thing, too. Even some of those, I mentioned that I put South Carolina in terms of resumes at 23. The group from 17 to 22, if you have blind resume exercise, you will pick South Carolina's over them. The only caveat is they're going to be guaranteed to get higher just because they win a majority of their games, but they play in small conferences. Yeah. And they don't have the opportunity to accumulate quad one opportunities that they do. The committee takes that into account. So I'll take that into account and just give them the benefit of the doubt and give them a better resume. Even after that exercise, you're still in the mid-20s.
You're pulling for Vandy and Carolina this weekend real hard.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, Vandy is your best friend right now. You need them to hop in the top 25.
Couple of Gamecock basketball notes to get you as we continue to drive around the SEC. You're listening to the Postgame Show. Welcome back. Final few minutes of the program coming at you on this Monday. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell. It's the post-game show. Continue to drive around the SEC. A couple of Gamecock basketball notes that we didn't get to earlier. First off, yesterday, Jameer Jones, a kid from Florida, did as expected, according to the On3 recruiting prediction machine, commit to Providence.
Kim English, good coach. Big get.
And South Carolina, after losing Trent Noah, is in the portal business again, and they are looking, according to our buddy Wes Mitchell and others, at former Vandy power forward Jamie Vinson, a 3-star recruit, big kid, 6'10", so a very different role perhaps for the slot that is open, Elijah, relative to a 2 or a 3. You think maybe they're going to go after a 3 or something like that, somebody that can shoot and kind of play a little bit both ways. But you take what's out there. If you can go get somebody like this that can offer some more size down low, you'll find somebody that can score from outside.
Yeah, you hope so. That's the thing with the 3-point shooters. Maybe my thing too is you'd like to see Colin Murray Boyles extend his range a little bit because Nick Pringle, we when it was announced that he was going to be playing for South Carolina, we dove through the numbers and found that exactly 100% of his baskets were made at the rim.
Right.
100%. Right. Every single basket made at the rim. He's not there to shoot threes or stretch the floor. And if you can get Colin to stretch the floor, that's going to open up so much of your offense. That's going to make Nick Pringle better. Yeah. So, look, I've heard from some of the folks in the building that Colin's he's got a good jumper. I'd like to see that put in play a little bit, because you're going to have to space the floor out a little bit. That's my only concern. With
he's gonna have to work on. That's part of what you do, right? You develop your work because he wants to be that guy at the next level too. So
got to add it to your game.
But Vincent coming in for a visit this week. We'll keep an eye on what's going on there. So that does. We're not concluding the show, but that does officially conclude now the drive around the SEC. Brought to you by Herndon Chevy, your hometown Chevy dealer. Save $20,000 on new Silverados. Together, let's drive. Speaking of basketball, some committee full of doctors and trainers, I guess, or either just dudes, says Bronny James has been cleared. I'm imagining that there are medical people on this committee, and not just marketing people on.
In order to clear somebody, yeah, I would hope so.
But I don't know. But anyway, Bronny has been medically cleared to remain in the NBA draft.
As if he didn't play a whole season of college basketball this past year.
I guess the latest around him is that he is going to remain in the draft regardless, but college kids in the draft that would like to retain eligibility have until May 29th to do so, I believe. So there's still a chance. There's a lot of people around the NBA that believe Bronny and LeBron will be some sort of package deal. Brian Windhorst, apparently, who knows LeBron quite well, today basically said, that's not really a thing at all. So I'm going to take Wendy's word on that because I do think that he gets most of his intel on LeBron from LeBron.
Oh, absolutely. His entire career. He has been covering LeBron since LeBron was a high schooler. Yeah. I think they have a pretty good rapport.
Hell, I think Windhorst might have been just out of high school. Not much.
Might have got a high school together.
Not much different, a year before him. Not much different. But, look, again, the things that are on Bronny James' shoulders were not placed there by Bronny James or even LeBron James. But that's your name. That's your dad. You did go to a high-profile school. I'd love to know what his season would have been like without, a very serious heart condition thrown into the mix.
Yeah.
A
scare.
If he wants to stay, look, I don't know, G League, whatever. I just, what I don't want is maybe, and this is just me saying this, like, do LeBron and others say, like, hey, he can't go to the G League. College is one thing, but G League? There needs to be some, maybe Bronny actually can do some good for the G League for a year.
Yeah. Bring attention to it. Well, that's the thing. He's going to have to. He was not good enough this season. If we're being honest, if we're pretending his name is, Bronny Campbell, then he is not being talked about as a draft pick. It's not a discussion at all.
I don't know. I mean, you're tall. You played basketball.
Yeah, I'm actually taller than Bronny James, too, and that's also
See, look at
another
that.
problem.
There.
Is because he was listed at like 6'4"
Yeah.
at Southern Cali coming out of high school, and apparently he measured 6'1" at the combine.
Uh-oh.
So you want to talk about height flubbing. Buddy, I don't height flub like that when I'm talking to people. I don't even do that, right? Not even a 3-inch extent. So he's 6'1". He's undersized at every position on the floor, and he didn't produce a lot at that level. And it's, which is why I hate for him that these expectations are put on him, because there's development needed. He's
Right.
a work in progress.
Right.
And if he's going to be playing pro ball in the NBA, it will be in the G League. And that's for the best, because he will benefit from that.
I agree.
But-
and again, bring some attention to it. So
Yep. A ton
we'll
of
see
it.
how that goes. Good stuff today. Appreciate Coach Kingston time as always, and to all of you who chimed in. Listen, I get it. It was a rough weekend. You love this baseball program. I do think there's a little bit of a silver lining, and then we'll take a look later this summer at what the big picture may hold. We'll talk to Derek Scott tomorrow. Lots to do here. For Elijah, I'm Jay. Enjoy the rest of your night. See y'all.